thank everyone for joining us, as I think this is a very, very important topic. I mean, thankfully, I also recognize many of you from the world of interfaith and the activities that we've done in the past. I wear a different kippah, not just as rabbi of Hadash, that's, by the way, the new name of the synagogue, but also as president of Interfaith Neighborhood, which is an organization of clergy, religious leaders that used to meet much more regularly before COVID. So we're trying to use a good religious term and resurrect the organization. And hopefully we will be successful. We've had a couple of events since COVID, and I consider this as a part of those events. As one of the things that we were been really trying to do is create dialogue, get people speaking to one another. It's all fine and nice to do interfaith activities. People come together, they hear a few speeches that everybody agrees with, they sing a few songs. It's very nice. But we want people to be able to talk with one another and get to know one another and see people, not just figures. We also did some education. We've had a number of wonderful presentations on different religious groups, of course, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, but also Baha'i and Quaker, and love to continue those as well. And interfaith dialogue, I think, is so important today. One, I think on some level, all religious communities, faith communities, however you want to define them, do have a commitment to peace and harmony, and people getting along and working together and caring for other people. I think that's absolutely true. And unfortunately, religion is under the gun in modern society. I may not think there's such a war against it, but it certainly has had its share of struggles. And I think we as religious, faith communities, whatever, we have to work together. We have to be able to put a very positive face on religion and religious ideas and our ideas of peace and harmony, because they don't necessarily come from the secular world, I'm sorry to say. But of course, interfaith dialogue, for all that we share, there are very real differences between us. And we can't just paper over them and pretend they don't exist. They're very real, and hopefully each of us is passionate in his or her own way for our tradition, for our community. And so there can be very real differences. Of course, we also know that intrafaith dialogue is also difficult. We can't always talk within our own religious communities. One of my favorite jokes that my community has probably heard too many times is that there's a guy who's trapped on a desert island, and he's finally rescued, and he shows how he survived and how the structures he built, and there are two identical structures. And Mr. Bernstein, what are these? They're synagogues. But Mr. Bernstein, you're the only one on the island. Why did you build two? One to pray in and one I wouldn't set foot into. So, you know, and I told that to my Greek Orthodox chiropractor. It doesn't matter. We all know that within any religious tradition, there are plenty of conflicts. So all the more so when we're trying to speak with people who are different, legitimately different than we are. And needless to say, we are also living in very fraught times. And not just religiously, politically, within this country. Political groups can't talk with one another. Even within the political parties, they can't always talk with one another. So learning how to speak to one another, learning how to listen to one another, learning how to appreciate each other, even as we acknowledge the very real differences. That, I think, is a tremendously important mission for all of us in today's world. So let me turn it over to our speakers.
Thank you, Rabbi Popke. Before I even say anything, I want to also welcome my very good friend, Mohammed Al-Homsi. I am the board chair of the Interfaith Encounter Association, based in Jerusalem, and we recently started a Jewish-Muslim group, some Christians in it also, but primarily a Jewish-Muslim group in New Jersey at Teaneck, and Mohammed is the Muslim co-chair of that group. So I asked him to come tonight in order to make things much more real and authentic by hearing from him as well. So what I will do is get us started for a little bit, show one brief video, tell you a little bit about the organization, and then turn things over to Mohammed so we can hear a little bit from him. And I want to welcome the people on Zoom who hopefully they can hear me too. So before we even get to the nuts and bolts of how we do the hard work that we do, and the fact that if it exists, if it's possible, if it exists, it must be possible, right? Before we even describe that, I want to just put one thing out there, a little bit of a plea even, and that is, please do not mistake our passion for naivete. Everyone who does the kind of work that I'm about to describe does it not out of a need to escape reality, but because they know it's the only way to build a better one. They know it's the only way to build a shared future in which all of our children can live without fear. I'll tell you in a moment how October 7th started for me, but it's probably relevant to mention that for 6 years I was the second in command of a combat anti-terror unit in Mishmar Hagvul, the Israel border guard. There is pretty much no form of human violence I have not seen from 6 inches away. We here are not peddling miracles or panaceas or a magic way to sprinkle fairy dust on the conflict and just instantly turn enemies into friends. Okay, maybe in a way we are, but really the process is all about the hard work of building relationships, step by step, encounter by encounter, trying to listen to the other's pain while being in the midst of our own. One of our founders, Dr. Yehuda Stolov, who you'll see in a video in a moment, is fond of saying that if you put Jews and Muslims in a room, that having them hit it off is actually the easiest thing in the world. And he's largely right. He is mostly right. And the vast majority of the time, this is indeed exactly what happens. I think in all the Jewish-Muslim encounters I've ever been part of, the only times I've seen an actual argument were either intra-Jewish arguments or intra-Muslim arguments. I don't think I've once seen, Jews and Muslims not hit it off theologically, because we're so close, we're so similar, we have so much in common, that we end up sort of very quickly saying to each other, wait a minute, why are we fighting again, right? And that's an almost guaranteed result. Nonetheless, none of us live in a bubble, and we know that what is going on around us right now is exceedingly, exceedingly trying. There are 3 principles which guide us in what we do and help to make it successful. One, the biggest, all who are willing to meet the other as equals and in an atmosphere of mutual respect are welcome, whatever their political beliefs are. Number 2, I'm going to do this quickly because we'll talk about it more. Number 2, everyone represents only themselves, not their country or government. Number 3, which is kind of a subset of number 2, everyone participates as who and as what they are. If you hide your identity, then there's almost no point to doing any of this. Since our organization doesn't formally, officially do politics, since we hold the political stuff in abeyance until after we rehumanize each other and get to know each other, we usually speak as an organization more in terms of religious identification. We don't refer to Israelis and Arabs, we refer to Jews and Muslims and Christians. But if someone asks me how I identify, I will tell them that I identify as a Zionist Israeli Orthodox Jew. Maybe I'll say modern Orthodox Jew, liberal Orthodox Jew, whatever. But all of those components are essential to me. No one who takes part in what we do has to hide or have their identity conferred on them by anyone but themselves. So the morning of October 7th, I don't want to dwell on this, but you'll see in a moment why I'm starting here. It started for me at 8 a.m. I was sitting in our kitchen in Jerusalem eating breakfast, and I started hearing loud concussions and explosions overhead. I've been in combat. It wasn't my first rodeo, as my wife says. So I know that it's pretty hard to tell how distant these things are from the sound because they're so forceful that they can rattle the building even from a mile or two away. But that's what was going on. So I was eating my cornflakes. I did not interrupt breakfast because, you know, we all have our own psychological way of reacting to these things, and mine at that moment was, nobody's going to keep me from finishing my cornflakes. So I was eating my cornflakes. And after, I don't know, 3 or 4 booms, to this day, we don't know if they were things that landed or interceptions overhead. We don't know. But after 3 or 4 of those, my wife, Ruthie, woke up. She's a heavy sleeper, and came into the kitchen and said, "What's going on? What's going on?" And I said, "We're at war and they're shooting missiles at us." I went back to cornflakes. Ruthie quickly threw on her clothes, and she largely spent the rest of the day going to and from the bomb shelter. We do have a bomb shelter in our building. It was 3 stories down and very small and cramped. So it's a bit of a crapshoot whether you would even make it in time once you hear the siren go off. It's like on the edge, but she spent a lot of time in the bomb shelter. I kind of went down to visit, but that was about all I did. After the holiday ended, it was Simchat Torah, as you will remember, so it was a holiday. After the holiday ended, I immediately contacted our office staff, Carolina, Yehuda, and Abir, in order to talk about how our many encounter groups would navigate what happened and what was to come, and how we might support them. The simple fact is that we were all in a state of shock, and none of us really knew what to do or how to do it. For me, this doesn't even make any sense because I haven't figured it out myself, but I think I was feeling a mixture of defiance and helplessness all at the same time. I knew that I would be attending many funerals. We all did. Everyone in the organization knew that. And after a few days, the staff, with my input, decided to start by putting together a Zoom session for our coordinators just to support each other, share feelings, tell each other how our families are and where they are, and hopefully build some sort of consensus, not about politics, but about how to help each other on the ground and protect the relationships we had painstakingly built. A word of explanation, we have active now, actually the number on that sheet that you have is a mistake, but it's an understandable mistake. It says we formed 123 ongoing encounter groups. That is correct historically over the course of the organization, but the number that's active at one time is between 40 and 50. So each such encounter group, and most are in the Holy Land, but we have now 3 in the US. Each encounter group has a Jewish co-chair, a Muslim co-chair, and if there are Christians in that group, a Christian co-chair. So we invited all the coordinators, which, you know, if you add up the numbers, it's a pretty good crowd, to join us on this Zoom, just as a first step. Emotionally, again, you can't ask me why, because I haven't quite figured it out yet, but I did not feel like joining. I knew that some of the people who would be there were my heroes and had sacrificed for peace far more than I ever had, but I also knew that the coming months were going to be very, very rough. Maybe I wanted some kind of reassurances, but mostly I just reacted to the whole thing by wanting to be alone, really. Some of the reports about what had happened were just coming out, but I knew a little more than what was appearing in the media because I have several friends who were journalists who had been invited to take pictures of the areas that had been attacked. I had seen some of the film and some of the photographs already, and it filled me with a deep sense of dread as to how my country, any of us, could have a future in the region, no matter how things turned out. And I think I understood instinctively that the fact that things had deteriorated to that degree at one and the same time made it vastly more urgent for Israel to reach an understanding with Palestinian society than ever before, and yet at the same time far more difficult and far less likely. That's a tough spot to be in. So I kind of responded to it by sulking. right? Time-honored way, total avoidance. I think I was perhaps also a little bit depressed about myself now being the old guy whose life needed to be defended by the kids I watched grow up. So I watched the news, I spoke to my sources, and I really just wanted to be kind of quiet. I don't think I was afraid to put my trust in them. They had earned my trust 1,000 times over, but I just wasn't feeling sociable. So what happened? My wife said to me, "Bob, you're the board chair of the organization. You need to be on the Zoom." So I decided at the last moment that I would join, but I would not say anything. I would just listen. The main reason being that, to be honest, I had no idea what to say. I had absolutely no idea what I would say. So I figured I would log in and just be quiet and nobody would notice me. Our staff person, Carolina, from the office was running the Zoom, and what ended up happening was that she sort of went, through each person on the screen in the Hollywood Squares layout, and said, and called on them to just say something for a few minutes. So she came to me and I wasn't able to hide. I didn't know what to say. So I said something like, "I just want you all to know that in one form or another, I am doing reconciliation work for 25 years, and this is by far the hardest moment that I have faced." And Muhammad may remember better than I do what I said, but I remember saying, "Honestly, I do not know how to fix this." And I didn't know what else to say, so I didn't really say much else, but I guess I looked pretty distraught. And then we went on to the next person. Unbeknownst to me, Mohammed had just joined the Zoom. I did not expect you to be in the Zoom because I knew it was in the middle of a workday for you. This was happening at 8 p.m. in Jerusalem, so just after lunchtime in New Jersey, New York. Unbeknownst to me, while I had been saying those few sentences, Mohammed had logged in the middle of a workday from his car. And when Carolina called on him, he told me how relieved he was to hear that Ruthie and I were okay, that he loved and respected us and looked forward to seeing us both soon. That might have been the only time on the Zoom that one participant directly addressed another one, but I don't remember. In any case, it cut right through whatever was blocking me. Maybe it didn't sound like it was that big a deal, I don't know. But it was a simple, direct human encounter which just showed empathy and love. That was what it was. That was what it was, nothing more. It didn't solve any of the broader problems. It didn't erase differences. It glossed over nothing. But it made me realize as I was sitting there feeling very dehumanized by the world in general, that Mohammed was able to fully humanize me even in those circumstances, which were about as hard as they can get. Imagine if we could all do that. So I'm not the guy peddling political solutions. The organization doesn't do that. But I know that there won't be one, that there can't be one without trust. And the path to that and to hope is simple human empathy. What happened that day was that we created one small island of not being each other's enemies. And that proved that since such a thing exists, it must be possible. We have done this with another mathematical mistake. I wrote that this is what we have done with 10,000 others. That is actually incorrect. It's 20,000. So we've had 20,000 people participate in our events so far since the founding of the organization in 2001. And as you see on the data sheet, in spite of everything, we're still growing and have grown quite substantially this year. Before I move on, think of how that encounter that the two of us had and that everybody witnessed on the Zoom, think of how that encounter can change the whole character of our conversation when we eventually do argue, right? It might be a fierce argument. We might each think that the other one is whatever, insert your favorite adjective, right? But when it comes, it will be an argument between friends. It will be an argument between people who trust each other and trust each other's motives. There's nothing bigger than that. This morning, as I was preparing for this talk, I ran across just a Facebook post by another good friend. His name is Rabbi Bob Kaplan, and he's, I don't know his official title now, but he's one of the heads of the Jewish Community Relations Council in New York. And this is what he wrote. I didn't even tell him that I was going to lift this from his Facebook post, but I'm sure he would support me. Violating the dignity of those we disagree with is now the norm. The Torah values the humanity and dignity of the other, even if we wholly reject their narrative. We need to regain the ability to see and honor the dignity in the other. This takes great personal work and courage, combined with the glue of emunah, of faith, of our belief in the Borei Olam, God who creates the universe as our common Father and our common Creator. I think one of the key observations that we work with and try to build is that, like any loving father, God wants us to love each other. And that in some sense, when we don't do so, when we don't manage to create a world with trust, in some way we're all breaking faith with God. I'm gonna just throw out one other quote. I have so much else to say about the organization, but I want to make sure that Mohammed has enough time. So I'm just going to share one other brief thought, and then I'll ask Mohammed to share a few words. This was posted by a friend named Tuvit, who's married to the son of a friend of ours in Jerusalem. And this is what she wrote. This is very short. It's 4 or 5 sentences. A month ago today, our friend became a widow. Our children's friends became orphans. Our friend fell in battle defending us. Our friend would like you to add light to this world by honoring her late husband's memory. She's asking you to please take a minute to do good. In his memory, please talk to someone you would not normally talk to and try to learn something from them. My husband had the brilliance to try to learn from everyone. This is the friend speaking now who's a recent widow. My husband had the brilliance to try to learn from everyone, not because he had something in common with them, but because he loved learning from people who were different from him. His humility, empathy, curiosity, and brilliance helped him be able to talk to and learn from anyone, especially those who were different from him. And then she quotes, I think it's from Pirkei Avot, but she quotes the line in Hebrew, Rabbi Charlie, help me out, Ezehu chacham halomed mikol adam. Who is wise? One who learns from every human being, mikol adam. And she points out that the quote doesn't say, who is wise, one who learns from every Jew. Could have said that for the same price. But instead it says, one who learns from every human being. May we all spread light and goodness in the world. Something I didn't write in my notes, but this is the last thing I'll say before I introduce Mohammed, is that my impetus to get into this work initially was not because of politics. I didn't have interest in that angle really. What put me into it was that in graduate school, when I was doing doctoral work in Kabbalah, in Jewish mysticism, I fell in with some professors who were teaching Sufism. Sufism is the Islamic, I don't want to say equivalent, but it's the mystical strand of theology within Islam. And I was extremely, extremely taken by it. And by the time I finished my coursework in the program, I almost would have described myself as a Jewish Sufi. It had a profound, profound transformative effect on me on a personal level. The more I studied it, the more I came to learn that we share so many themes in common, that, basically Kabbalah and Sufism are almost the same mode of thought, but that we each see through the theological forms and structures of each other's tradition. But there's tremendous commonality. Even some of the folk tales and stories are virtually the same thing. And I could not imagine my own spirituality, and I still can't, without the influence of studying those Islamic Sufi texts when I was a grad student at NYU. So the reason I got into this was because I have a sense that my own spirituality can be sometimes challenged, okay, but overall greatly enriched by the study of other faiths. And I think that this is a consciousness that we all bring to this endeavor. It takes courage, it takes ability, sometimes it takes a little bit of self-control, but we're all the better for it. And I was certainly the better for that encounter with Mohammed. Mohammed, I don't even think I spoke to you afterwards. I don't really remember. And the thing that you didn't know was that literally 5 minutes before the Zoom, I was telling Ruthie, nah, I'm not going to go on the Zoom. You know? So anyway, with that thought, my good friend Mohammed, please.
Good evening. I greet you tonight by the greetings of Islam, and I say Salam Alaikum. Peace be upon you all. What Bob just shared right now, I was not aware of, and most of my actions, I'm usually not aware of how they are perceived by another. And all I can say right now is that my efforts has been blessed by God, and thank God for that. I mean, gratitude for that. So I brought some notes. And upon saying Salam Alaikum, I also say Shalom, because I'm in your place. Thank you very much for inviting me tonight. I'd like to thank Rabbi Bob Carroll for inviting me tonight. I'd like to thank Rabbi Charlie Hopke. Thank you very much for your invitation tonight. And I'd like to thank the other co-chair in the Interfaith Encounter Association, Joan Heffler, who couldn't attend tonight, but she wanted to. So her mind is with us, her heart is with us. I'd like to thank Professor Alan Brill, who introduced me to the Interfaith Encounter Association at a meeting that I met him when I invited Rabbi Lee Wiseman to our local mosque in Union City. All those people have contributed into making me who I am and being on a path that I'm on. And mostly I'd like to thank my brother Mutaz for bringing me today and supporting me. This is, I attend different synagogues, and every time I come, of course, I feel a little bit anxious. I'm not, I don't know how I will be perceived. But just like what Bob said, this type of work, just because it seems on the outside that it's naive, it really requires a lot of work on behavior, a lot of work on finding the courage to when it feels as though it's not, you shouldn't do it. When it feels you shouldn't do it, that you actually do it. You open up that dialogue, you go to that synagogue. Same thing. In the future, I will continue to invite Rabbi Bob Carroll, Rabbi Charlie to our mosques for engagement, for dialogue. And the minimum that we have received so far from those gatherings, we ask for feedback. And the feedback that we get is that from the Jewish and from the Muslims, they say it's so therapeutic for us that we were able to speak about how we felt, whether it's after October 7th or before, because this is an ongoing issue. This is not something that is recent or something that is new. So there have been people who have been trying to find ways to build bridges. For instance, Bob and I have been working on this for 9-10 years, almost a decade. Why did we start working on this issue a decade ago? There was no October 7th back then, but we recognized that there's something going on, that a person who's proactive is sometimes able to attend to a situation before it arises and it gets to that situation. The reason we had an October 7th is because we didn't have enough dialogues. The reason we had anything that has been going on is because we haven't been reaching out to each other. Because if you realize, if you can, my 6-year-old daughter says to me sometimes, I stop by a gas station and the guy says, what would you like me to fill up? And I say, can you fill it up regular, brother? And my 6-year-old says, that's not your brother, And she says, he's not Muslim. And I say, he's my brother in humanity. I said, don't forget that. There's brotherhood for me as a Muslim to Muslim. There's brotherhood for me as human to human. There's brotherhood for me in lineage. And if we can all find those connections within us, right now I'm in a room with human beings who have emotions, who have children, who have grandchildren, who are dealing with similar issues that we are dealing with in mosques. Now, let me ask you a question. If I came today and you know what, I put all the other topics on the side and I begin to speak with you, I say, what do you think for us to initiate a mental health interfaith group? Would all of you join? Yeah. If I say, what do you think of us starting a men or women walking club where every Sunday morning we go out for a walk? Will most of you join? Yeah. Same thing by us, our mosques, they'll join. If we say, why don't we start a group where we go visit the sick people in the hospital and just sit there and listen to this elderly person who for the last 5 years did not get a visit from a relative and nobody has listened to them. Let's have patience and just listen to them. They have things to talk about, but they don't have many people who are interested in listening to them. If we do that legwork, if we are able to find that, you know what we'll get? For me personally, it gives me purpose in life. Because when I look at the creation of God, what I see all around, when I look at the sun, I see that it has a purpose. When I look at the moon, I see it has a purpose. When I look at a tree, I see that it has a purpose. And a lot of times I struggled with that. I asked myself, why do I feel like I'm a zero on the left? You go through life, is it about eating, drinking, kids, money? Is that it? Every single human being has a time when they are born and a time where they will physically die. And the time in between is the only time that we have. And I don't want to just live a life where it had no purpose, right? So I reflect, and what I'd like to invite you to, just leave you with that, is that try to reflect. Think by yourself. What is my purpose? What can I do to contribute into this dialogue? What can I do to participate into initiating my own dialogue? It doesn't have to be related or with the Interfaith Encounter Association. You can do your own inner dialogue. You can do your inner dialogue between you and yourself. And once you build that relationship, then you can begin the dialogue between you and your family, your daughters, your sons, your mothers, your fathers, your relatives. Begin there. And once you bring peace among them, then go to your community, go to your synagogue. I tell the Muslims, I say, go to your mosque. Because just like Rabbi Charlie said, he said, you struggle with your interfaith dialogue. Guess what? As a Muslim, I can tell you that we struggle with our interfaith dialogue. The other day we had an interfaith event that carried Muslims from 25 different countries. from Ghana, from Africa, from Ukraine, from Albania, from Syria, from Pakistan, and let me tell you, every one of those Muslims perceive the religion differently than the other. So a lot of times we need to bring understanding within our organizations before we are able to bring an understanding to the outside. And I know, I'm realizing the more I push into this interfaith dialogue, the more I'm attracting, or they are attracting, people who are like-minded, who are on the same path. And I don't know how it's happening. It's like, I feel as though it's miraculous. It's like, I say my effort has been blessed, because I don't know. If you ask me again, can you plan it all out again and do the same thing that you've done? I'll say, no, I don't know how to. I really don't. I'm just going to places, I'm speaking, I'm meeting people, and then I'm also investing the time into myself. So you know what I do? I have 3 copies, one of the Quran, one of the Tanakh, and one of the Old Testament Bible in Arabic. And I read it. And I read your book. And I read my book. And I read, because this, as a Muslim, this is prescribed for me in my Quran. It says, read the books. Believe in the books. I believe in your God. I believe in your book. I believe that the same divinity and deity who created me is a single creator who also created you. And I believe that he's so divine, and he's so loving, and he's so caring, and he's so beautiful that anything he touches has beauty inside of it. But what's happening a lot is that many people, they bring the worst out of us. But we all have beauty inside of us, because take a look at any newborn. Can you see how beautiful of a personality a child is? They're able to become friends in seconds. Put them in a room and they'll be friends together. And each one of us had that at some point in their lives. But as we grew, we were taught, we looked in the mirror, our environment, the politics around the world, a lot of things influenced our behavior. So it is time for us to sit back, close our eyes, do the meditation, do the yoga, do the stretching, do whatever it takes for you to take a retreat and reflect back and connect with your inner self, your beautiful self that was touched by the divinity and the single deity that we all believe in, and let that revive your soul and your spirit to do the things that you've always dreamt of doing, and to feel that you have participated in something that is good, that will bring good to the world, that is of a higher purpose of just a personal gain. What we're doing right now has, for us, it has to do little with our personal gain and more with the larger picture of bringing peace and civility between people all over the world, for the protection of us, our families, and our children in this country and abroad. Thank you very much for giving me time tonight. Thank you.
Folks, I actually meant to roll the video of one of our meetings before I introduced Mohammed, but maybe it's better that we waited until after you've met him. So about, month and a half, 2 months ago, roughly, CNN contacted our office in Jerusalem. They had somehow, I had nothing to do with it, I really didn't, and I don't even know how this happened, but CNN had heard that we had had a post-October, I mean, the group existed before, but we had been having meetings in New Jersey and wanted to film one of our encounters. So they filmed for how long? I was only there for like 2-3 hours. And they edited it down to 3.5 minutes. So, okay, that's a lot of editing. But I want to show you the video of that. because it's really inspiring. And if we have time, I'd like to give you really quickly afterwards 2 or 3 examples of the kind of religious interaction and encounter that we do, just so you have more of a concrete idea of how we work. And then we can talk with you and take questions. So let me figure out how to play the video for you.
Divisions around the world, but inside one group in the United States, Jews and Muslims are already bridging that divide, seen as Jenny Freeman has.
Thousands of miles from the fighting, the violence, the conflict,
Focus on the solution.
there is food, laughter, and love in this New Jersey home.
The first thing you do is you reach out to the other side.
This is the Bergen County chapter of the Interfaith Encounter Association, a larger organization based in Jerusalem dedicated to respectful dialogue and support between religions.
Every time I go to the meetings, like this, all these things that we have in common, I'm like, wow, you guys believe that too, right?
This group of Muslims and Jews from several states has met for years through war, peace, and a pandemic to listen and learn.
We live in a bubble. And I think when you live in a bubble, this is when the stereotypes and all these isms tend to come out.
I actually think that the power of a group like this is actually the difference. And we have different ways of thinking about things. And that's when I can learn something. I can't learn something from someone who's the same as me.
But that also means frank conversations about pain and discrimination, with Islamophobic and anti-Semitic incidents on the rise.
So I realized, like, oh, you guys get also demonized just as much as we do. And so we are not that different. And learning that from you guys helps me understand that we are in this together.
You have to stand up to people who may not believe what you have to say. And I am in the same position, and I appreciate very much that you've been doing that. And I try to do the same as well.
At times, the work feels daunting.
We are in a very tough position, that when I introduce myself, that I do interfaith, a lot of people say I wouldn't want to be you these days.
But for Muhammad Al-Hamsi from Pennsylvania and Joan Heffler-Goldstein from New Jersey, these relationships have proved a lifeline since October 7th.
When the hostilities first broke out, you know, I finally stopped crying. I called Muhammad's wife, Tisam, because I needed to speak to my sister, who is looking at everything from a different direction than I am.
It must have been incredibly difficult.
It was really hard. It was really hard. It was really important for me to be able to see, if I could see what her view was and show her what my view was, and see if we could come together, and in fact we did.
What went through your mind when your friend, your Jewish friend, Joan, reached out to your wife for comfort?
I was happy that Joan reached out to my wife. Yeah, I think it was over an hour conversation. I said, I'll take it. I said, thank you, God. Thank you for this connection that they have.
This connection was built on 9 years of these types of conversations.
If we're going to talk about politics, we first have to have the love and understanding and the deep trust. It's really a deep trust.
There's still disagreement. There's still lessons to learn. But in this room, there's hope.
I really feel that there's hope for the world. And now we should go eat.
Danny Freeman, CNN, Teaneck, New Jersey.
And thanks to Danny Freeman for that report. Coming up, a flurry of section.
I know what was coming next. So I'm aware that it's 10 to 8 now. What I'd like to do is just spend about 5 minutes to just give you a couple specific ideas of some of the programmatic things that we've been doing. One of which, Mohammed, by the way, is brand new. I only just found out about it myself, just so you have a bit of a better idea. And then we're happy to take any questions or hear what you folks think. And most of all, invite you to join us and participate. So one thing that we try to do in a lot of our meetings, each encounter, the office always yells at me when I call it a meeting. They say it's called an encounter. Each time we try to pick a religious topic as the main idea of conversation. It can be literally absolutely anything. It can be ethics, it can be lifestyle, it can be life cycle issues, birth, death, marriage, it could be food, it could be prayer, you name it, we've probably done it. But one thing that we do return to very often is trying to leverage the idea of the Abrahamic family as a tool in our peace-building efforts. What I mean by this is that the Abrahamic family can be seen in the context of a broader ethical commitment and kingship, in which each individual group is able to retain its own identity and even, forgive me for saying it, their sense of spiritual superiority. Everybody wants to think that they're right? Or at least more right than everybody else. It's human nature. Everybody gets to retain that while still recognizing the ethical and family bonds that they have with each other. As I said before, the deepest among our participants are very aware that, like any loving parent, God wants us to love each other with genuine brotherly love. And they know that when this element is absent, we can talk about how we love God all we want. God knows that it's false. In this sense, religious identity and even the boundaries that it creates can be an ally of, or at least not work against, that broader commitment to the dignity and rights of every human being. Specific example, because that was all really abstract. In the biblical tale of Abraham and Sarah, driving out Hagar, who of course became the mother, in our tradition, became the mother of Ishmael, the Arab nation. So in that biblical tale in our Torah, one sees a tragic story of the terrible outcome of preferring one son over the other, right? And there's, some of you may know that, you know, the Midrash on Rashi that I'm thinking, just popped into my mind. The Jewish medieval biblical commentator Rashi, on the verse when God tells Abraham to take his son and offer him as a sacrifice, the verse says, I have to run this by my brain in Hebrew because I don't remember it in English. It says, Kach na et bincha et yechidcha asher ahavta. Take your son, your only son, who you love, right? And Rashi cites a midrash taking that verse apart saying, what are you talking about? Take your only son whom you love. He had two sons. And the answer that the midrash gives is, God was saying to Abraham, because you only loved one son, that's why I'm giving you this commandment, right? So it's all about where you put it in the comma. The verse should be read, Kach na et bincha, take your son, et yechidcha asher ahavta, the only one whom you love, and offer him up as a sacrifice. Et Yitzchak, thank you. Right, right. So even in our own midrash, right, this is described as a tragic tale of favoritism, of Abraham loving his sons unequally. But what else happens in the Bible itself? God sends an angel to Hagar and says that God has heard her affliction, right? We are taught that God is merciful and compassionate to Hagar in her suffering. Our tradition always points out, not always, but it frequently points out flaws in our heroes. And in this explanation, Abraham is implicitly criticized for not loving Ishmael, or at least not loving him fully, right? And for not honoring the extended family ties that Ishmael's descendants and Isaac's descendants still very much share. So we, at this moment, when I say we, I mean Jews and Christians, those who have the Torah's version of the narrative, are the heirs of this tale in which God chose Isaac and not Ishmael to carry on Abraham's faith and family. But the text is very subtle, and if we read it closely and honestly, it scolds us for what we have all become. So it's just one example of a text that we've used at times to delve into. Another project which was just begun, it's actually still in formation, I think it's brilliant. I wish I had thought of it. There's a project in Israel called 929. I haven't counted, but apparently the Tanakh, our version of the Bible, contains exactly 929 chapters. It seems low to me. Does it seem low to you? But ostensibly it's 929. So the project is called 929, and what it does is every week people come together, or as individuals, and study one of the chapters with commentaries and modern literature that's relevant for it, even poetry and songs, articles, anything. It's very, very eclectic, but it's a way to draw people who are not necessarily traditionally religious into in-depth, serious intellectual study of our biblical tradition. So what we're working on now, I really love this idea, is a version of 929 which matches up each one of those 929 chapters with texts from the Quran or from elsewhere in the Islamic tradition, and get people to study all that together. Sure, we're still finding like staff for it, people to put it together, but I think it's an absolutely brilliant idea. And the other thing that we've been doing lately, I have a whole bunch of meeting reports and things. I don't want this to go too long, but the other thing that we have begun doing is most of our work is basically grassroots. It's people like us coming together and meeting. So what we're also doing is bringing together respected religious leaders from each faith to do a series of dialogues together with each other. And that usually consists of, depends who we have that week, but it usually consists of a Jew, a Muslim, and a Christian. Sometimes it includes a Druze. We get some Buddhists that pass through, anyone who's relevant that has something important to contribute. So all these things are ongoing efforts. It remains a very difficult time. One of the meeting topics from one of our meetings in the Holy Land, sometimes a sidetrack is a better path than whatever you had planned. So one of the groups got into a discussion of how in Judaism, there's an idea that you have to bless God not only for the good, but even for the bad. Kishem shemavarchim ala tov, mavarchim gam ala ra'ah. And there's apparently a very similar tradition in Islam. So they had a lengthy discussion about that, and it was very much a way for people to bond over their shared grief and sorrow and sense of impotence at the broader circumstances that's going on around us. In any case, that's who we are. We don't forbid anyone from bringing up anything political, but what we do is we hold it in abeyance until human relationships are built. And that's how we've been so successful. The disadvantage of a political group is, if you don't buy into whatever the political program is of the group, then you're not part of it, and well, you can't be part of the group, right? And we have managed to reach out to a very wide range of political opinions in all the societies that we work in. I will not tell you that we've reached out to everyone, right? Because there are people who will not look at the other as an equal and meet them as an equal. Sometimes we can change them, and the only way we can change them is if we get them involved. But short of that, we have really the whole political spectrum from all of our societies taking part, and that's something that I really think that no other organization can claim, certainly not in numbers like we have. We've reached at least 20,000, that's probably a conservative number, since 2001 when we were founded. And we've had, as you saw in the data sheet, I was astonished when I saw this, but we've had 479 individual encounters in 2023, which is more than one per day, even with the war happening and everything else, which I think is just absolutely an amazing achievement and speaks powerfully to the commitment of the people involved who know that this is something that they cannot and will not walk away from. Absolute last thing I'll say, because it's 8 o'clock, Another video that I didn't get to show was a group that I've been working with for many, many years called the Circle of Light and Hope. And it consists of mostly Jews from Jerusalem and Muslim Palestinians from the Hebron area. And the co-chair of the group is named Talib. He's a very close friend. And Talib has been in both Israeli jails and Palestinian jails. And he cannot be intimidated. And one day, we arrive for our meeting, and he describes himself as a German Palestinian, by which he means that he's very, very on time. He's never late. And he's absolutely true. He's never late. So we got there like, 4 minutes late. And I knew that if we get there 4 minutes late, Talib and his guys are going to be inside eating already. But they weren't. They were milling around the parking lot. So I approached him and I said, Talib, what's up? Because I knew something was wrong. I mean, I know my people, And he told me that someone had approached them and threatened them and said that they could not guarantee their safety if they continued meeting with us in that location. So Talib's suggestion at the moment was that we go to another restaurant that was a few blocks away. And I nixed that idea because I felt that we wouldn't be safe there. I felt that the Jews wouldn't be safe in that other spot. That's what we deal with. This is the kind of stumbling block that we had to somehow get past. So we decided to call it a day. We decided to live to fight again another day, which is a bad metaphor, but that's what we decided. And later that night, Talib sent me an email. His English is not super, he gets by, but his German is better than his English. And he sent me an email saying that he just wanted me to tell everyone in the group that none of he nor his people will let any threats or intimidation keep them from meeting with us ever in the future. And that was what taught me that we have people here who understand so deeply how much depends on this work that they will risk everything for it. And that's an amazing, powerful statement. So please join us and ask us anything you'd like. Sorry again? If you go, sorry.
The question was, are you funded by any organizations?
If you go to our website, we list all the funders. The funders are a mixture of private foundations. We have a good number of European churches, and I'm happy to say that as of 2-3 months ago, the United States government is a major funder of us. After many years of trying, we got a very sizable grant from USAID, which is wonderful, wonderful news. Bad news about that grant is that the terms of that grant don't allow the money to be spent outside the Holy Land, so it can't benefit our groups here, but it's made a tremendous difference to the organization. We have never gotten any Israeli government money, and we won't now. I think they'd be more likely to persecute us than fund us at this point in time. And we do have a fair number of individual donations from other religious organizations around the world, but it's all listed in detail. So if you go to interfaith-encounter.org, you'll see the whole list of donations. I think everything above $500 or something is listed.
So how does a group get started? I see that there's 2 here in New Jersey. How does a group get started to encounter?
All I know is that years back there had been a Teaneck Jewish Muslim group which for some reason stopped meeting. And about whatever number of years ago, Mohammed and I and Professor Alan Brill decided, well, I don't even know if we think of it as a resurrection of that group or a new group. It's a philosophical question, but we just reached out to each other. Mohammed knew Alan. Alan Brill's a very good friend of mine, and he's a professor of interfaith relations. So between his contacts and all of our contacts, we decided to try to get something going. It's pretty much that simple. There is a history of it in Teaneck. I don't know if it just petered out or if there was some other reason. I honestly don't know. But it's been tremendously rewarding. If you have anything to add, please.
Yeah, sure. Good evening again. So I also belong to Toastmasters International, which is a public speaking group, and it's a worldwide organization that has chapters almost in every city around the world. And if you're a person who wants to start a Toastmasters group, you reach out, you apply for an application, they give you a tax ID number, you become a nonprofit initiator of a group. And once you do that, part of what is a requirement is for you to already have 20 paid members. And the payment is usually like $10 a month. So in a structure like this, anyone who's a coordinator or a planner or an initiator of a nonprofit organization or a corporation or an LLC or anything like that can help you initiate, a group like this, and I don't see why anyone cannot do it. And a lot of times, like if you're in a synagogue, a rabbi will help you. If you're at a mosque, the imam will help you, because the synagogue is a nonprofit organization, the mosque is a nonprofit organization. So I'm sure, you can ask around in your local groups to initiate something like this. And as soon as you initiate that organization, then it's a matter of calling your friend and have a conversation with her or him. And then, if they are like-minded people who'd like to join, then you have a coordinator or a planner setting up maybe like one event a month or something like this until your group gains momentum. I hope this helps.
Thanks. I knew he'd know more than I did. Anybody else?
A number of years ago, I don't know how many, Holocaust studies began in schools. Have you given any thought to going into a state or a few states and trying to bring your program into the schools for young children or middle school children or in colleges? Because it seems like if it's going to be successful, I'm not sure my ideas.
No, I think it's a fantastic idea. We've done some of it in the Holy Land, in Israel, Palestine. We've done some programs where students educate each other about each other's faith. We've done a little of that. Mostly they're, Jewish and Muslim kids do not study together. Mostly, there are exceptions, but for the most part they don't. So it's very, very valuable to meet somebody from one of the other schools, and we set up sister schools and sister towns, things like that. We haven't gotten to that here. We've had a few conversations about it, I know. I think it's a great idea, and I hope we do get there here. So, sure.
So a part of the requirement to start up a Toastmasters group is that all members have to be 18 or over. And I make that kind of like in our organization, I make that kind of, we don't explicitly say that only 18s are allowed, but we try to keep it that way. Just because we do understand that, schools are made to teach, not preach. And we don't want what we're doing to become a bit more leaning toward preaching anything. Because there are parents of secularists, there are parents of atheists, and we need, In order for us, for our rights to be protected, we need to protect the rights of others.
There was actually an initiative, and talk about having a little bit of hope for the future. There was an initiative begun by a young Jewish woman and a young Muslim woman. Bob knows Leora, who is the Jewish woman. She's the granddaughter of a conservative rabbi. And I think what they're doing, I just glanced at the article, I didn't even have a chance to read the whole thing. But what's so remarkable is that they immediately got to work on this with their friends and creating this dialogue and this discussion. And these are high school students. And the courage to do that is just really remarkable. It takes courage within their own communities because sadly within all of the communities, not everyone is crazy about this type of dialogue and this type of contact. And also I literally just saw, as I was looking for the article on these two young women, I came across another one, and I have a couple copies here. It's in Jewish Telegraphic Agency, a different campus story, Jewish-Palestinian cooperation. Atidan International seeks equal participation with 3 college chapters, and it talks about a Palestinian and a Jewish student who have created a student organization of Jews and Palestinians that began at the University of Texas in Austin 2 years ago. And initially it focused on the similarities, as Bob mentioned. There's, the more you study, the more you see the incredible connections between Judaism and Islam. And then their efforts have intensified. Again, I haven't read the article. I literally just found it before we began our program tonight. But there are a lot of things going on. We normally think of all the conflicts and the Islamophobia or we've been watching now for a couple of years the horrible rise of anti-Semitism. But thank God that's not all the news. I think we do have a problem. We know this from social media and from the news media. It's the loud voices, which are generally the extreme voices, or extreme right, extreme left, and they don't necessarily speak for the average person. We try to think about that in terms of politics. I think we also have to think about that in terms of religion, just about everything. Now things are coming out on social media. There is no filter. Everything comes immediately. And you have people who are influencers. And when you really look at them, it's like, who are they? I mean, not that every human being isn't important. Every human being is created by God. On the other hand, not every person has to be an influencer or should be in certain positions. And yet, they get a following on social media, and they're off the wall, sorry to put it that way. There are gems in there, but there are also a lot of people who, they're not dealing with a full deck. So, and it's hard to know, because all you have is this line of electronic text. But there are wonderful things, and thank God young people are doing them. And I think sometimes it takes the young people who haven't been hardened and don't have so much baggage with them that they're willing to just go and do. And it's exciting to know that there are things out there. So that, not enough, definitely not enough, but they do happen. And we can just... Yeah, well, it began, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, the organization began in Israel, Palestine. Oh, sorry.
So the first event was a few weeks after the second Intifada started. I was around in Jerusalem then, but I was not affiliated with the organization. So 2001, it was a retreat outside of Nablus just after all the violence started. And you can imagine the courage it took, from everyone to do that. That was our founding event, and the founders who went on to build the organization were the 4 people who had organized that event. So technically, it was actually Nablus.
So as horrible as everything often is in the Middle East, sometimes out of the utter chaos and pain and tragedy, there are courageous people who move forward and realize we just, this can't be the status quo. And we have to find some way around it. And that's what these dialogue groups are committed to. And I think that's true. And we were even talking about, this is pre-COVID, about Interfaith Neighborhood joining with Interfaith International. Perhaps if we get that organization going, we will, or at least, have offshoot groups. I've only been able to attend a couple of the meetings of the TNEC group because they're generally Sunday mornings, and as you know, I'm a little busy with Hebrew school, and board meetings, etc. But it doesn't mean we couldn't. Oh yeah, absolutely.
To answer your question, we haven't had so much momentum in the United States because, as Rabbi Bob Carroll mentioned, that this organization, because it was initiated in the Holy Land, the funds that go there, it cannot be used in the United States. So it has been lack of funding for us to be able to organize larger events. Although so far, all the events that we have been doing, I've held an event at my house. Joan Heffler, the other co-chair, she held an event at her house. Rabbi Alan Brill has been holding events at his house. So we've been, what's interesting is that, just like Rabbi Carroll just mentioned earlier, how we feel as though we need to give this mission our all. And I personally, we have a similar saying in an Islamic tradition that says, my prayer and my donations and all of my life and all of my death and all of my family are for the sake of God. Because we know that every single one of us is going to die and we're going to meet God, we say that all of our life and all of our efforts and my children and my wife and my house and everything is for the sake of God. So when you live that mission, you feel at times that, a lot of people said, why are you having interfaith dialogue at your home? You're exposing your wife and your kids and, to people, strangers. And I welcomed everybody with an open heart. And again, just like Rabbi Carroll said, it's not because I'm naive. It's because I've done the extra legwork. It's because I'm trying to increase my faith in God and my spiritual faith. It is because I want, when I'm doing my prayer early in the morning before the sun rises, I tell God, I say, God, I want you to witness that I have bent over backwards trying to extend my hand to shake the other person's hand. And I just want you to make me more powerful. So in the spirit of that, if Rabbi Popke and your group here in this synagogue, if you'd like to initiate an interfaith organization with the United States government, or just apply for the paperwork and initiate it, and then I would love to contribute, Rabbi Carroll would love to contribute, and then we can get some donations or some grants or something that where we could spark that candle and allow that to give light to the entire community.
So I want to thank Muhammad, especially the last moment coming. So much appreciate his words, and Rabbi Carroll, even though he owed me. But really, I want to thank them for what they do, not just for being here, but what they have dedicated themselves to, and really making this a better world. Are working hard against the tide often, the tide within our own communities, the general community, but to be able to push, to do God's work. For those of us who come in with a strong religious faith, we believe it is God's work to make the world better. And I'll just leave you with a thought. Rabbi Carroll quoted Pirkei Avot, that wonderful section of the Mishnah, which actually, the Mishnah is the first strata of the Talmud, and this particular tractate, this particular section, is rather unique because it doesn't deal so much with law as the character of the people who carry out the law and make judgments. And of course, Rabbi Carroll quoted the very famous section from Ben Zoma, Ezehu Ashir, who was happy with his portion. Another one, Ezehu Gibor, who is mighty, one who can control himself. HaKoveshet Yitzro, literally who controls his impulses. And I think that's probably the first thing that we have to do when we begin dialogue is like, okay, just breathe, control your impulse so you can listen. But what's even more powerful is in the commentary on that Mishnah is another line that says, Ezehu Gibor, who is a hero, who is mighty, ha'oseh sono ohavo, one who makes his enemy into his friend. And it's not just for Jedi Knights. It's really for something that we should really think about and work on with everyone. And again, it's not just in terms of religion, but in so many, in a world that is torn and fraught with conflict, we have to find all the paths that we can that move beyond the conflict and unite us in our common humanity. Thank you all so much for being here. Really appreciate it. And please.
Add that one to my talk, that text. Yeah. I didn't even think of that one.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.